Let me just tell you, this is a long one. It has to be, since I've been dealing with this guy for over 4 years now. It all started my last year of high school. I had gotten really into the hardcore scene from my city and attended a bunch of small gigs with my best friend. One day I received a Facebook friend request from a guy named Alan. Looking at his profile and the stuff that he posted, I noticed that he was just 3 years older than me, from the same city, and he liked many of the same bands that I did. So 17-year-old me added him. We soon started talking, mostly about bands and school. He was in the middle of getting his college degree, and I was just about to choose mine. From time to time, he would tell me how pretty I was and ask if I had a boyfriend. I did find him attractive too, so I flirted back. However, I very quickly lost interest. Within a few minutes after flirting, he would tell me that he actually had a girlfriend, but they were having some trouble. I didn't want to take part in any cheating kind of stuff or such, so I just told him he should think what was best for him and his girlfriend and do the right thing. From then on, I limited my chats with him to music and school once more, and he too stopped flirting with me. Anyway, a month or so passed without texting when suddenly I got a message from him. We talked like we used to, and just before I had to say bye, he told me that he had broken up with his girlfriend and felt so much better. He thanked me for always listening to him without judging and said that my advice had really helped him. I felt happy for him. I honestly don't know if this girl was really mean or not, but he seemed happy to be out of the relationship, and I wanted to be a good friend, so I was happy for him too. Now, at this point, I don't know what came to me. Maybe it was because I did find him attractive, or because it was very late and I wasn't making the best decisions. But I told him my best friend's birthday was in a couple of days and that he should come to the party too. He agreed within a second, and I told him to meet me at the station close to her house. So I finally got to meet him at the station after almost half a year of talking online. I know what you're thinking, and no, he wasn't a 50-year-old sexual predator, although I must admit, I should have been more careful since he could have been someone interested in taking my liver. Nevertheless, we met. It was a bit awkward at first since neither of us knew what to say, so we just walked away to my friend's house making small talk. I guess we were both very nervous. When we got there, things got better and we actually had a good time, although he pretty much only talked to me. For the next month, we kept going out for the basic dates until he officially asked me to go steady and we became a couple. From here and on, the actual creepy stuff would start. It hadn't been more than 3 weeks and I was starting to feel anxious. It's a weird feeling that I used to have when I was little, and I knew I was going to be punished for either getting bad grades or doing something bad in general. It was stupid though, because I wasn't a child anymore and I wasn't even doing anything wrong. I just had this feeling whenever he was around me. What made it even more complicated is the fact that I didn't really feel that he had changed. He wasn't rude or anything, he was just unsettling. He would want to see me 24/7. We never went to his house, and whenever we were at my house, he would refuse to be anywhere else but my room. And he would spend hours just staring at me. And believe me, I know you could take all of this with romantic intentions, but the way he made me feel was not warm and fuzzy, but instead shivery and anxious. I must admit, I took the first chance he gave me and broke up with him. He meant to text his ex some lyrics to a breakup and love song, and then texted them to me by accident. He apologized and he explained it was just to let her down for good. I had none of it. I told him that we may have jumped into the relationship thing way too soon and that I thought it was better if we just went back to being friends. That night, he called me 37 times. The next morning I had school, and throughout the day I got a text that immediately got me nervous. "What time will you be at home? I'm coming over to talk," he wrote. I really didn't want to see him, so I told him I wasn't sure and that he shouldn't go. He should just leave it. Plus, we had only been dating for like 4 or 5 weeks, so why make a big deal out of it? Just let it die. I did in fact get home late that night, and oh surprise, guess who was standing in front of my door? He had a blank stare, and when I was passing by to park the car in the garage, he followed me with expressionless eyes. I went inside and left my stuff in my room, shaking. My brother came to me asking what the hell was going on. He said Alan had been standing outside for over 4 hours now, I told him I would handle it since he's my little brother, so I didn't want to worry him. I took a deep breath and went outside. We argued for around an hour, in which he would tell me he loved me and that he knew that we were meant to be together. I told him I wasn't feeling comfortable and that I just wanted to go back to being friends. He then told me to move in with him. For a few minutes, I was speechless. He used this time to explain how he would get a job and keep studying so I could finish high school and then get a job too. According to him, we would then start a business together and have our first child by the time I was 21. He had our whole life planned out, and I had no saying in it. I managed to catch a moment to speak and tell him straight up that he was out of his mind. I was only 17 and nowhere close to thinking about living with him, much less having a child. Alan then made this weird face, like he wanted to cry, but not actually. I swear it was like a cheap acting trick, and it just creeped me out even more. I cut him off and told him we were over and ran inside. From here on, he got worse and worse. He would text my friends even when they had no idea who he was, and then told them to tell me that I needed to be with him, which is where I belonged. I then blocked him from all social media, since he would send me nonstop messages and post weird poems that had a hint of scary, with things like, "I stand in the dark so you can't see me, but you're the light so I'll always see you." He called my house. If I pick up, he yells, "I need you," nonstop over and over. If anyone else picks up, he just hangs up. Now, this kept happening for almost half a year, and I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I call the police? Well, I think I failed to mention I'm from Mexico City, and I can promise you, no officer's going to take any action against a few dozen phone calls. I don't even think they'd know what to do. Little by little, the phone call stopped, but he was still texting me and dedicating me songs in an online radio station that most people from the hardcore scene listen to. This one particular time, he dedicated Your Betrayal to me, which was another song. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Alan became unstable. He would go from dedicating me love poems to insulting me, saying that I was ruining his life. I honestly lost count of how many crazy and scary things he's done in these past years. But I think the worst of them all was this one time a year ago when I went to a concert with my best friend. I was kind of flirting with one of the musicians that opened for the band, and my friend was playing wingman. He went to get us some beers, and just as he stood up, I turned to chat with my friend, and I saw two figures take the empty chairs in front of us. It was Alan and a girl that he introduced as his sister. The very moment my friend and I saw them, we froze. A mixture of being uncomfortable and scared got to me, and I just looked away. "You cut your hair." He broke the silence, reaching for my bangs. I instinctively pulled back. "It looks great on you. Everything does." He spoke in a soft but numb voice. I nodded and I told him I was with someone, so he should leave the chair. I looked to his sister to encourage her too, but she was absent-minded playing with her phone. "Do you want a paper flower?" he asked, completely ignoring what I said before. The guy I had been flirting with was now making his way back, but since he saw two other people now in his place, he just drifted away. "Dude, you seriously need to get going." I was losing my patience, but I didn't want to make a scene since the concert hadn't even started and I wasn't getting kicked out. Once again, he ignored me and started making a rose out of a napkin. "Let's just go over there," my friend suggested, and I took her on the offer, or so I intended. Alan's sister, who suddenly lost interest in her phone, was now grabbing me by the arm really tight, keeping me from walking away, not saying a word, just grabbing me. I tried to loosen myself, but before I could, Alan took one of my hands and put the paper flower right in it. Then his sister let go. Now, for what happened after this, I must say two things. One, I'm known for being maybe a little too aggressive, but when it comes to people who I cared for at any point in my life, I have a soft spot. And two, Alan had been beyond creepy, given that it had now been around 3 years and he wouldn't leave me alone, but he had never been violent. Both rules were broken that night. I snapped. I took the flower he just gave me, looking him straight in the eyes, and I slammed it against the table so it would lose any shape it had. "You're not a good guy. You're a creeper who won't leave me alone and thinks I owe him a relationship." I said right up in his face with anger I don't think I've ever felt. My friend and I pushed through and made our way outside for a smoke and had to clear my head. We were chatting. I was shaking and she was just trying to calm me down, asking me if I was feeling better and telling me that if I wanted to leave it was okay. Then we heard the screaming. At first it was just some bottles falling and a couple of screams, so we thought someone messed up and they were mocking them. But it didn't stop there. The yelling continued, and we saw the bouncers at the entrance then rush inside. I quickly put out my cigarette and then headed towards the commotion with my friend. In all honesty, I was hoping to just see another bar fight, but it was much worse than that. There were 2 tables knocked over, and I don't know how many broken beer bottles on the floor. A bunch of personal articles from a backpack were being poured into the ground, and the one responsible for all of this was no other than Alan. Quickly enough, one of the bouncers restrained him as the other one searched him for any potential weapon that he might have had. His sister on the other side of the small venue screamed at Alan and the bouncers some stuff that I really couldn't make out since there was a lot of noise. As they literally dragged him out, I was pushed outside by the crowd and stepped to the side speechless, just watching Alan curse and kick. I had never seen him this violent. In fact, I had never seen him violent at all. Then he saw me. He yelled at me. But since a small crowd had formed around, people thought he was just on drugs yelling nonsense. "You ruined my life!" My eyes started to fill with tears. Maybe it was because I was scared or because I still couldn't fully understand what was going on around me. What could I have possibly done to him in order to make him like this? Thankfully, my friend found me along the crowd, and without even asking, she dragged me to the subway and back home. I cried all the way. I haven't seen him ever since, but I know he's still around. How so? Well, I now live in Japan, and I've been living here for a year or so. It was my birthday just a few months ago, and I got a big bouquet of roses with a card that read, "I shouldn't have given you paper when you deserve the real ones. Happy birthday, my love. Signed, Alan." Warning. The following story mentions murder. I live in a middle low-class neighborhood in the Caribbean. It's a quiet place where nothing happens. The type of place that people go and retire to and sip pina coladas all day long. However, a few houses next to mine lived a family that was not like the rest. They had the biggest house on the street and lived luxuriously. Their kids would play with me, especially the smallest girl we all nicknamed Tiny. Tiny was about 5 when I was 11, and she was always at my house. I knew my mom and the neighbors were concerned about a 5-year-old being outside all day and not arriving at her house until midnight on school days. But it was a quiet place where nothing happened, so no one got worried. When Tiny turned 6, her parents threw a giant birthday party for her, and all the neighborhood kids were invited. I wanted to go. They had bouncy houses, water slides, and everything a kid would want to play with, but my parents didn't allow me to go. I never knew why. I suppose it was because my mom didn't know her mom. I remember feeling very sad because everyone was there and I was just playing alone at my house. After the birthday, things went back to normal, and one day we were all playing and talking about what our parents did for work. We asked Tiny and her siblings, but none of them knew what they did except that he traveled a lot and that he was always at meetings. I didn't pay much attention, and we all just continued on with our day. One night we were playing on the street when we started hearing loud pops coming from Tiny's house. I will never forget that day. The neighbors, including my own mom, came out rushing us inside, yelling it was gunshots. Some of us even got in my house, and we stayed there as my next door neighbor, who was a cop, ran towards Tiny's house. All we saw after the gunshots were a black van rushing down the street and almost killing a dog. Some men then entered the house. Tiny and her siblings wanted to check out what was going on, but everyone forbade them to go. All I remember was a bunch of cops and ambulances a few minutes later, and then in a day, I never saw Tiny or her siblings again. For a couple of months, the house sat empty, but black vans and strange men kept coming into the neighborhood door to door asking for any information about the man and his children. No one in the neighborhood spoke about it. I know the cops asked me about Tiny and the kids, and if they ever said anything weird about her mom and dad, but I was only 11, and I was much more concerned about playing Mario Kart Wii than about what happened that night. Years passed and the story faded away. Now that I'm grown up, I asked my neighbor who was the cop what actually went down that night, as there were rumors the guy died. He said that night the man had a gun emptied in his skull, and that his wife was gravely wounded because he was a drug lord that was trying to make a deal with the police to turn in his rival gangs and some other people to the cops. The men in the van that were going door to door wanted to know where his kids and wife were to also shut them up. As to the kids, his oldest son was found dead a few hours away in a neighboring town, his car set ablaze. His other children are now living in other countries under witness protection programs. I just hope wherever Tiny is, she's doing okay, and that her family got the help they needed. The wife was shot in the leg, and it caused her massive blood loss, but overall, she survived. This was the first major news in my town besides another massacre that happened in the 70s, when a prominent woman was hatched to death alongside her adult daughter by the daughter's husband. Warning: the following story is dark. It mentions child abuse as well as murder of a child. You have been warned. When I was about 9 or 10, I was invited to a classmate's birthday party at some swimming baths. All of us are the same age. It was a small class of about 20 kids, and I'm pretty sure everyone was invited. Just to clarify, I'm a boy. Anyway, I kind of got separated from everyone, and it was just me and this girl all alone. I wasn't particularly close with her, but I did know her as she was in my class. To describe the location we were in, it was in a tunnel that connected the main wave pool to a lazy river. There wasn't really anybody else there, just me and her, when she suddenly lunged at me without warning. She grabbed my head and held it underwater. I was a pretty skinny kid, and she was bigger than me and a bit of a tomboy. About 20 seconds went by as I then furiously tried to free myself, but she wasn't letting go. Fight or flight and massive panic took over, and I eventually fought my way free. I was coughing and spluttering water as I emerged. I remember looking at her and just being in shock. I think I began to ask why she did that when she lunged at me again. She again held my head underwater for what felt like a lifetime before I fought my way free. Both times I genuinely thought I was going to drown and she didn't let me up. I had to fight my way free. I couldn't swim at this time, but the water in the lazy river and tunnel was just maybe chest high. I began to backpedal away from her. She was giggling as if it was funny and had this kind of crazed look and grin on her face. I couldn't just climb out to escape as it was a tunnel, so I had to try and get out of there. As I was backpedaling, she was following me, and I made sure to keep distance so she couldn't lunge again, but she was gaining on me. I actually managed to reason with her as I was so scared of her I was babbling at her. I tried to distract her by suggesting we go down a water slide together. It worked, as I could see her thinking about it, and she stopped chasing me. I managed to exit the tunnel and water, and she slowly followed me but seemed a bit unsure. I immediately felt more safe as I was now out of the water, and I could see other people as we headed towards the slides. I kept talking all the way up about how fun the slides were, but she didn't really speak at all and had a really strange look on her face the whole time. Anyway, after we went down the slides, I caught up with my friends and just stuck with them for the rest of the time as I was still a bit shook up. I never told them about it as it was a bit embarrassing to admit that a girl tried to drown me and I was worried I'd get teased. Anyway, fast forward to adulthood. This girl turned out to be a lesbian. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but she got with her partner who had 2 or 3 kids from her previous relationship with a guy. Turns out they would torture the kids and eventually killed one of them. She's currently serving a life sentence in prison. I told my friends about the swimming pool incident after hearing about her crimes, and I'm pretty sure they think I'm just bullshitting, as none of them took me seriously. Maybe as I kind of lightheartedly said that I was almost victim number 1. However, nonetheless, It's a bit crazy to think back, as she was obviously a genuine psychopath, and if I'd never fought her off me to escape and then convinced her to go down that slide, I genuinely believe she could have killed me. This is a real story that's happening now, but this all really started on my birthday. I did speak with the authority about these instances, but I'm also open to hearing your takes as well. It's been pretty frightening. Quick backstory. I'm a 27-year-old female living with a female roommate and her boyfriend. Her name is Julia. About a year ago, Julia and I started going to a hangout spot, and we met a woman working there around our age. Her name is Sam. Julia and I stopped going after a while, but I still stayed friends with Sam. Not super close, but seeing her once every couple of weeks. She supported my business, brought me small gifts, and invited me places over the course of the year. I enjoyed being friends with her. On my birthday, Sam posted my photo on social media. That's when I get a message from an account I don't know asking me to message them back and discuss a film opportunity. Half curious, I replied. They say a bunch to finally come out and then say that they're casting adult film stars. They then quote me a large amount of money. He says it's very private, porn sold overseas, no one will ever see it. I declined politely. I honestly chuckled. By the way, they're not Googleable. There's nothing on their social media page or anything about their production company online. The person messaging insists that I text their female reference. Curiosity gets the best of me because I do that. Female reference weirds me out. She's normal at first, but seems too excited about the actual job. She's encouraging me to do my casting with the person I've messaged and saying I'm very lucky he's even offered. He's only offered that to a few girls. I'm thinking, no woman in porn really feels this excited and happy and satisfied with it all. I'm weirded out and she's blocked. He messaged me to ask if we talked. I say yes, but decline again, and he's blocked now too. I'm embarrassed I even considered, but then a couple of days later, my roommate shows me a weird text to her personal number. It's the same people with a similar offer. They say though, "We found you on a list, you must have signed up." I'm pretty sure my roommate did no such thing. I'll say here, not many people know both me and my roommate. I tell my roommate what happened to me, and we're both really confused. For the next 4 months or so, I get text messages. I answer some of them nice, and I answer some of them mean, and I ignore others completely. They never asked for photos, info, or anything really except to consider the offer and maybe come for a drink to discuss it in person. That was it, until yesterday. Sam sends me a message on social media. It's a group chat with a profile I've never seen, plus Sam and my business profile. I do creative team building work. Sam wants to introduce me to her friend Dave. Dave needs to hire a team builder at a fancy hotel about an hour away from me. Sam makes the introductions, and I say thank you, and then Sam leaves the group chat. Dave's profile is empty. She messages me privately and basically says, "I used to casually see this guy. He's really good for the job. He's pretty wealthy and I know that he owns like multiple businesses. He used to be in adult film productions, but I think he's been done with that. And this would be for a different business he has. Other than that, he's a normal dude." I message the man back and ask, "What's the company? And can I have a website or any pages? Any more info?" He then says that he'll launch the website at the event I'm being hired for, and that he just bought the company and it's being branded. But Sam is messaging me too. She says he's selling the company, and this 2-day hotel event is for their farewell party. She suggests that I bring my boyfriend since it would be an all-expenses-paid stay. Also, she mentioned that she's going to visit this old friend tonight to catch up over drinks. She said that she hasn't seen him in a long time. Alright, this is weird as hell. This guy is messaging me along the lines of, "Sorry, I know this is weird. Feel free to bring your boyfriend." What? And he also mentions how he was seeing my friend tonight. I leave him on read until the morning. I sent him the original Weird Adult Film account, and I ask, "Is this you?" They say nope, and I'm just thinking, yeah, okay. They respond thumbs up and leave the chat. I had mentioned to Sam months ago about the weird offer and text messages I got. She too said she got bizarre messages in the past. They only stopped when she said she would call the police. She didn't offer any more details, so I didn't push it. So now I message Sam and I say straight up, Sam, I think this is the person that's been harassing me from different numbers. She acts weirded out and surprised. She asked about the original account that messaged me. Eventually she closes the convo and goes to bed. I left her on red. I don't answer her call the next day, and she texts me, that was really weird last night. Call me if you want to chat because I'm confused. I don't respond. Today she texted me, okay, and I wrote her back, basically saying, listen, you know I've been weirded out about this, and I've been wondering if someone's trying to abduct me, and now I'm wondering if you're involved, either innocently or not. It's too much for me. She wrote me back saying more or less that she understands that it was a very scary experience, but she thinks that I'm way overreacting, and basically she seems offended that I could even think such a thing. She also said that she wouldn't ever want to speak with someone again who would think that about her. She left it with that she lives her life on a straight path, and she can't let someone try and drag her down into something like that. I don't know if you guys know this, but you can use a free website online to insert photos of someone, and it will generate pages on the internet that match based on facial recognition. When I began having this fear of her involvement, I searched her, and I found what I'm 99% of the time was thumbnails of her in an adult film, either her or her splitting image, as it also pulled known photos of her. I didn't say this to her, of course, but that last statement she gave me is extra weird knowing all that. So that's my story. Hopefully they don't get me. I'm not the one to be played with. I'm a female, and I turned 18 recently. For that reason, I was finally able to convince my mom to allow me to stay out all night, since in my state, 18-year-olds don't have a curfew. Basically, the story starts with my boyfriend Tristan and I going to our mutual friend Chris's birthday party. He was turning 18, and he had convinced his parents to allow him to have the house to himself and throw a party. He promised his parents that he wouldn't have any drugs or alcohol. But naturally, he got his older brother to buy the alcohol after his parents left, and other people brought their own drugs, mainly just marijuana. Chris lives less than a minute drive away from my house, and only about a 9-minute walk. My and Chris's neighborhood was built in the 80s, so for that reason, our houses aren't very big, so I could understand why Chris didn't want a lot of people there. For that reason, he made a rule that no strangers were allowed to come. The only way you could invite a +1 was if you were dating them and asked Chris if you could bring them, or if Chris knew the person you wanted to invite personally. As I mentioned previously, my boyfriend and I helped Chris plan the party and send out the invites. So for that reason, my boyfriend and I decided to get there early to help Chris set up the party. Between me, Tristan, and Chris, we all probably each sent out 15 invites from the people off the list, plus whoever Chris's brother decided to invite. When people finally started showing up, it wasn't long after Chris started bringing out the alcohol. I'd say probably about 50 to 60 people showed up, which is way more than Chris originally wanted, but a lot of people wanted to bring +1s. However, between me, Chris, and Tristan, nobody was really a stranger. In fact, I recognized everyone there. Even if I didn't know the person's name, I at least recognized everyone's face. After all, everyone who was invited was either one of Chris's brother's friends or someone from our school, or he used to go to our school, and there were a crap ton of mutual friends there too. There was only one person I didn't recognize there, and that was this one guy who showed up a little later in the night when everyone was drunk, and Chris's brother was no longer checking the door to see if the people who were coming in were on the list of invited people or not. This guy was wearing a baseball cap, had a beard that kind of looked like he glued pubic hair to his face, and he was wearing a Tennessee Titans t-shirt and khaki shorts, and I think he had Vans on. In all honesty, he looked only slightly older than everyone there, but he did fit in, and I probably wouldn't have ever noticed the guy if it wasn't for the fact that halfway in the night I bumped into him by accident after drunkenly tripping over my own feet after getting another drink. Unfortunately, my drink splashed out of my cup onto the guy, and I felt really bad, even in my drunken stupor. I remember overly apologizing and guiding the guy to the kitchen so I could grab some napkins. I grabbed the napkins and then handed them to him. He seemed cool about the whole thing, and he just kept telling me it was no problem. We actually engaged in small talk as I was wearing a Slipknot t-shirt, and he pointed out asking about my favorite album. I should mention that I'm pretty alternative. Sometimes I even dress pretty goth. Today was one of those days that I was feeling more goth than usual. So I was wearing a Slipknot t-shirt, a black skater shirt, and fishnet stockings with platform boots. I even had a chain, gothic gaudy jewelry, graphic eyeliner, everything. Whenever I tend to dress like this, it's not usual that I'll have guys hit on me. Except for the emo guys or the occasional stoner dude. Neither of which is my type. I'm more attracted to the stockier, flannel-wearing nerdy guys, like my boyfriend Tristan. This being said, I didn't think engaging in small talk with this random guy was weird or that he was trying to flirt with me or anything, especially since he was really only asking me about my favorite band. But then the conversation kind of took a turn to more personal questions. He started asking me things like, "Do you live in the area? Did you come with anybody? How old are you? What's your name? How much have you had to drink tonight? Do you have a boyfriend?" Questions like that. In my drunken stupor, I remember thinking his questions were a little personal, but I didn't think too much into it. I tried to answer the questions without giving away too many details. But honestly, I can't really say if I managed to do that or not, since I was drunk after all. Then out of nowhere, the guy asked me if I was a virgin, which was an insanely personal question, and I immediately started to get weirded out, especially since this guy seemed to be 100% sober. It suddenly dawned on me that I never even caught the guy's name. Trying to redirect his question and change the subject, I asked the guy what his name was, and he then told me that his name was Charlie. I didn't even know a Charlie, nor did I ever send an invite to anyone named Charlie. So I figured the guy was one of Chris's brother's friends. He then asked me again, "So, are you a virgin?" I remember in my drunken state awkwardly laughing. I really didn't want to answer this Charlie guy's question. I suddenly didn't want to be talking to this guy anymore at all. I desperately wanted a way out of this conversation. That came when another one of mine and my boyfriend's mutual friends, Tanner, came over to refill his drink. He saw me, yelled my name, and dabbed me up, then proceeded to tell me that my boyfriend was looking for me. I then quickly excused myself from this guy Charlie, and as I did, he gave Tanner a slightly dirty look, as if to say, "You just interrupted us." Tanner didn't even acknowledge the guy, as he then proceeded to tell me where Tristan was. Once I found Tristan, the night seemed to go pretty normal after that. My boyfriend and I now tipsy, busting down to the music for a bit, as well as taking more shots all throughout the night. That was until I started to realize every room I went into, that Charlie guy was there too, and he was always looking at me or glancing in my general direction, and I hadn't seen him take any shots or drink anything even once. I tried to just ignore him, thinking it was just a coincidence that he always happened to be in the same room as me. But now that I think about it, that was stupid. If it seems like someone's following you, they probably are. Anyway, later into the night, when a lot of people had begun to go home and most were passed out, my boyfriend and I drunkenly decided to sneak off to the guest bedroom. Thinking we had locked the door, we began to undress. And if you hadn't guessed by now, yes, we had sex. After we finished doing the deed, I collapsed on top of my boyfriend. I then turned my head to rest it under the crook of his neck. By doing that, my head was facing the direction of the door, and that's when I noticed the door was slightly cracked. Even though we were both drunk, I swore one of us had shut the door. Squinting my eyes to focus, that's when to my horror, I realized someone was peeking into the room through the crack in the door. I then screamed, "What the hell?" And I rushed to cover myself and boyfriend with the covers. Then whoever had been peeking through the crack in the door opened the door all the way and then apologized. It was Charlie. He said that he was sorry it wasn't what it looked like, and that he had just been looking for the bathroom. Even drunk, I knew that this was a lie. My boyfriend, however, who doesn't like confrontation, then awkwardly replied, yeah, that's okay, man. The bathroom is the next door to your left." Charlie then thanked Tristan and closed the door. Tristan's response kinda made me mad, and I wanted him to at least yell at the guy. I got up from the bed and began putting my clothes back on. At that point, the party was basically over and I just wanted to go home now. I felt violated and exposed. God knows how much action Charlie managed to see, and I really didn't believe his bathroom excuse. My boyfriend asked me what was wrong, and I proceeded to tell him how that guy had been asking me personal and creepy questions earlier in the night, and how it also seemed like he had been following me all throughout the party. Tristan agreed that seemed really weird, and he agreed to take me home. It was probably like 1 a.m. at this point. My mom thought I was going to spend the night with a friend who was going to be at the party, and we had cameras all over my house. While she agreed to let me stay out all night and let me go to the party, she made it very clear that she didn't want me drinking. So if I stumbled home drunk in the middle of the night, she might not let me go to another party for the rest of my senior year. So we decided to just spend the night at Tristan's house, first having to call his dad to make sure it was okay. His dad didn't pick up, but in our drunk state, we decided it would just be fine, and we'd just sneak in and lock Tristan's door if his dad decided to come into his room in the morning for whatever reason. We might have been drunk, but we were still pretty responsible, agreeing the best way to get home would be to walk. Now, like I mentioned previously, it was a 9-minute walk from Chris's house to mine, but it was about a 20-minute walk from Chris's house to Tristan's. So we then said bye to Chris and some of our friends who were still there. As we were walking out, I never saw that Charlie guy anywhere, so I figured he left soon after he got caught peeking in on us. As we started the walk to Tristan's house, the whole time I felt on edge. I felt like we were being followed, and on multiple occasions I looked behind us only to see nothing. Now, the majority of the walk to Tristan's house we were walking on the edge of the road because the neighborhood where Chris lives is situated on a main road. The road in front of Chris's house isn't as busy as mine, but this meant there were no sidewalks. That's not really important to the story other than I couldn't look behind me for too long because I had to keep looking ahead just in case a car was coming. Once we got closer to the neighborhood Tristan lived in, the road got less busy and ultimately way quieter. That's when it sounded like there were footsteps on the leaves in one of the yards behind us. As I looked behind me, I thought I saw someone duck behind a tree in a yard that we had just passed by. I told Tristan what I witnessed and that I thought we were being followed. Tristan then told me that it was most likely just a deer. I mean, that's totally plausible. The town that I live in is completely overrun by deer, so this seemed like a logical explanation, that it really was most likely just a deer. Eventually, we made it to Tristan's house, going through the back gate and the back door. I changed into some of Tristan's PJs, and we laid out in his bed and locked the door. I maybe laid down just for a bit until I realized I had to pee, so I went to the bathroom and then decided to get a glass of water from the kitchen. Now, I should mention that Tristan's kitchen is right across from his living room, and he has a giant bay window in his living room with no curtains and all the lights were off. And thanks to the street lights outside, I could see perfectly through the window into Tristan's front yard, and that's when I saw it. A person peeking from behind the giant tree in Tristan's front yard. I wanted to scream, but I didn't want to wake up Tristan's dad and risk getting caught. It would be an awkward situation to explain, especially since we were there without permission. I didn't know if whoever was hiding behind the tree could see me, but I grabbed my phone off the table and took a picture, making sure my flash was off. I checked Tristan's back door to make sure neither of us had forgotten to lock it after we came inside. I then ran back to Tristan's room as quietly as possible, woke him up, and then showed him the picture. Now, I had a deep feeling it was the Charlie guy from the party. My boyfriend started to get pissed off. He said that maybe it was one of their friends trying to scare us. At that time, I was still kinda drunk, so as much as I knew that wasn't true, I just settled on that being the case. Tristan does have a friend who was at the party that was only a 5-minute walk from his house, so maybe that guy followed us to scare us. But now that I think about it, That made no sense, because the only way they could even successfully scare us by hiding behind a tree in his front yard would be if they knew we were going to be in the living room, and there's just no way they would have known which room we would be in. So it was obviously someone hiding and stalking the house. I could tell that Tristan was on edge, and I saw doubt in his eyes. I could also tell that he didn't even believe his own explanation. I suggested that maybe he should tell his dad, but he said no because then his dad would know that we snuck over and he might tell my mom and he'd get in trouble. And I know that that sounds like a stupid reason, but I and Tristan's dad haven't gotten along well in the past, and my mom is really scary sometimes. Plus, she'd probably never let me go to another party again or hang out with Tristan for a long while if she found out that I snuck over to his house to sleep over. Tristan held me and told me we were safe, and that he doubted whoever it was would try to break in, and that it was probably just a friend trying to scare us. I don't know when, but eventually I fell asleep, and then I woke up later on, not knowing what woke me up. I found it really weird since I'm a pretty deep sleeper. I even slept through a tornado once, so waking up in the middle of the night was pretty unheard of for me. I tried to wait and see if I could find out what woke me up. That's when I heard it. It sounded like a clanking sound coming from the living room. I looked at the clock and I realized that I had only been asleep for maybe 20 minutes before that clanking sound had woke me up. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was Tristan's dog, Khaleesi, messing with her metal water bowl, but Khaleesi always sleeps in Tristan's dad's room, and she wasn't in the living room when I was out there earlier. Plus, there's no way she could have opened Tristan's dad's door by herself. That's when I remembered the person behind the tree and that Charlie guy. I woke up Tristan and asked him if he heard it. He said that maybe it was Khaleesi, but I told him that Khaleesi was in his dad's room. This I was sure of. He said that maybe it was the ice machine, but the ice machine wouldn't make the noise over and over again. Maybe a few times, but something was still making the clanking noise. I told him this, and I reminded him of the person in his yard from earlier, so he agreed to check it out. I watched by the hallway as he turned on the kitchen light, and the noise stopped. My boyfriend looked out all the windows, and he said he didn't see anyone. He turned off the light and said we should try to go back to sleep. But at that point, I was just way too paranoid. There was no way I could sleep after everything that had happened. Not even 10 minutes later, the clanking sound started up again, and once again, I encouraged my boyfriend to go check it out. So he did, but this time I told him to not turn on the light. He gave me a funny look, but obliged. I watched him walk out into the kitchen again. And again, I watched him from the hallway. This time, however, he gasped. He just stood there staring at the back door for a sec, and the clanking noise stopped again. I tried to get him to tell me what he was seeing, but he wouldn't tell me. So I was about to walk out of there when suddenly there was a knock at the back door. It wasn't a quiet knock. It was a harsh and aggressive knock. My boyfriend then told me to go back to his room, and we both booked it to his room and locked the door. I asked him what or who was there, and he said he saw a guy with a crowbar trying to break off the door handle. Then the guy looked up to the window. My boyfriend then said that he didn't know if the guy could see him or if he was staring at him, but that the guy stopped hitting the door handle and then smiled at him. This really creepy smile, and that's when the guy started knocking on the door. I asked my boyfriend what the guy looked like. He said it was dark, but it looked like the guy had a beard and was wearing a baseball cap. I literally felt all the color drain out of my face as I told him that sounds just like the description of the Charlie guy from the party. My boyfriend looked angry from this. Just then, the knocking on the back door became so loud and aggressive, I thought that he might actually break down the door. I then heard the sound of Tristan's dad's door now opening, following the sound of his footsteps and yelling. His dad then yelled, "Yo, if you don't get the hell out of here, I'm calling the police!" Then his dad came and knocked on Tristan's door. I quickly got up and hid in Tristan's closet. Then Tristan let his dad in. His dad asked him if he knew the guy at the back door, but Tristan just said that he was some guy at Chris's party who apparently followed him home. Tristan's dad then said, "Well, after I yelled at him, the guy ran off. He shouldn't come back, but if he does, let me know." Tristan's dad then said goodnight to him and walked back to his room. When Tristan's dad opened his door, Khaleesi walked out and walked into Tristan's room. I walked out of the closet and me and Tristan tried to go back to sleep, with Khaleesi now laying on the foot of the bed. Tristan fell back asleep eventually, but I still couldn't sleep. It was maybe like 4 in the morning, and I finally felt myself begin to doze off when Khaleesi then began to growl. It was a low growl, but it was enough to get my attention. Now, Khaleesi was a Siberian husky, and huskies are known for being very vocal dogs. Well, not Khaleesi. She barely ever made any noise. In fact, for the 1.5 years me and Tristan have been dating, I've only ever heard her bark once. I had never heard her growl before though. She got up off the bed and walked up by the window on the far left wall. I watched as she showed her teeth and began to growl louder now. I felt really uneasy. I woke up Tristan and brought his attention to what she was doing. Tristan agreed it was really out of character for her. Then there was a tap on the window. Me and Tristan just looked at each other in horror, and Khaleesi started to bark at the window. Tristan got up and drew the blinds to the window, and it was the same guy from the party peering into the window with the most creepiest smile I'd ever seen. With this, I actually screamed, and Tristan's dad came barging into the room, then ran out, ran into his room, grabbed his shotgun, and then ran out the back door. Then there was yelling coming from outside as we saw the guy at the window look behind him and then run away from the window. Eventually, Tristan's dad came back inside and then ran the guy off. He was definitely upset that I was there, especially since he knew my mom didn't give me permission to be here, nor did he. I told him all about that Charlie guy at the party, how creepy he was, and how that was the same guy and that he followed us here from the party. Tristan's dad explained that he was upset that I was here because if my mom found out, she could be pretty mad at him. But he said that he also knew that she'd probably be more pissed off if he sent me home after that creep had been outside the whole time, especially with him still out there somewhere. He said that he chased the guy with his gun until the guy ran into the woods across the street, and he then decided that he wasn't worth the chase and that he probably won't come back anyway. He asked if I wanted him to call the cops, but I told him no because I didn't want my mom finding out I was here. He said okay, told us goodnight, and then went back to bed. Finally, I was able to get some sleep, and as far as I know, the guy never came back that night. But the story doesn't end there. That whole thing happened maybe 2 weeks ago, and the most recent experience occurred 3 nights ago. When Tristan dropped me off from my house at 11 p.m. after we had hung out at his house for a bit, I got ready for bed, and I think I fell asleep around 1 a.m. I woke up at 3 a.m. with the need to pee. I was comfortable in bed, and I didn't really want to get up. But then I heard the driveway alarm go off through the house, which wasn't alarming because we had a lot of deer that would sometimes set it off. After a few minutes, I could no longer hold it, and I got up to go to the bathroom. I was about to open my bedroom door to go to the bathroom, when suddenly I had heard the garage door now open, which wasn't that weird or anything since my brother's room was in the basement, and the basement was connected to the garage. So I figured it was just my brother coming to get a snack or something. I was gonna open the door, but when I put my hand on the door handle, I suddenly just felt like something was wrong, and that something was telling me to not open that door. I can't tell you why. It was just a sudden deep gut feeling. As I pondered on whether or not I was just being paranoid, I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. I told myself it was just my brother and that he was probably just going to the bathroom, but the footsteps now got closer, and they stopped right outside my door. After a few seconds of silence, there was a slight knock. Again, trying not to think too much into it, since my brothers knocked on my door late in the night before to ask me something random or just annoy me like brothers do. I then replied, "Yes, what is it?" There was no reply. "Grayson, is that you?" I called out. Then there was a voice that was not my brother's, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. But I did recognize the voice. It was Charlie. My heart did a flip and dropped straight to my stomach. I then immediately locked my door. My door had a cursive pink S on it that stood for my name, so it's not that hard to guess that my room's is a girl's room. I knew then that the Charlie guy had broken into my house. Then the guy started trying to open my door. Once he realized it was locked, he started pulling and twisting the door handle really hard and banging and knocking on the door in an attempt to break it down, I assume. I screamed really loud. Now, my parents have this really loud industrial fan in their room that they keep on because they both need the room to be really cold, and my mom can't sleep without the noise of a fan on. It's so loud I can hear it through the wall separating our rooms, so I was almost afraid that my parents wouldn't hear me. But I then heard mumbling, and my stepdad burst out of their room. I then hear the Charlie guy run down the hallway and through the garage door, followed by my stepdad screaming and running after him. At this point, my mom came running out too, trying to open my door. Upon hearing her voice on the other side, I then quickly unlocked the door and let her in. She asked me what happened, and I began to tell her all about the creepy Charlie guy at the party, only leaving out a few details. However, I didn't tell her about him following me and Tristan back to his house. I didn't want my mom to know that I slept over. I know that it was probably a stupid decision, and I probably should have just told her, but I was really afraid that I'd get in trouble. My mom looked horrified and began to pray. So did I. My stepdad eventually came back into the house saying he lost the guy after he ran into the woods behind our house, just like before. My mom and stepdad then began to ask me a ton of questions, mainly wanting to know how the guy found out where we lived. I honestly had no idea, unless he somehow stalked me the last 2 weeks since the party and found out where I lived. We called the cops and the cops asked me questions, but the information I had didn't help them much since I only had the guy's first name. For all I know, Charlie wasn't even this guy's name. I gave them a brief description. They said they'd look into it, but we never heard anything back from them. Like I said, there wasn't really much they could do. Nothing was stolen, as I'm pretty sure I was the guy's main target. I'm not really sure why the guy targeted me or what I did to cause him to have such an obsession with me, but I'm sure if it wasn't me, he would have targeted one of the other girls at the party that night too. Well, come to find out, the guy entered through the back door downstairs because my brother woke up having to use the bathroom, but he didn't want to go all the way upstairs, so he went outside. But since he was half asleep, he forgot to relock the door, so the guy just walked right inside. I'm just really glad my brother was safe. We asked literally everyone from the party, and apparently nobody even knew that guy. Chris even said that he didn't even know a Charlie, and Chris's brother said that he did not invite that guy, but he remembered seeing him at the party and that he thought the guy was kind of sketchy, but that he figured he was just someone's plus one. This was 3 days ago, and I haven't seen or heard anything since. I don't think the police ever found out who the guy was, but nothing alarming has happened since. I just hope the guy doesn't come back. Update. I didn't mention that the police did check the camera footage in my house to see if they could identify the guy, but he was wearing a face mask and a hoodie. It did show him walking down my driveway trying to get in through the front door, and then going on through the back and everything else that happened from there. But the footage didn't help them identify him, unfortunately. The fact that he walked to my house makes me afraid that he lives in the area. I'll be sure to update if anything else happens. Hey everyone, that's about it for today's stories. If you have your own story that you would like to send, you can send it in at southerncannibal.com, or you can email it at southerncannibalstories@gmail.com. I look forward to telling your story. Have a good night or good day, everyone. And remember to always